Have you ever wondered what paved the way for India's independence in 1947? Perhaps it's time to satisfy that spark of curiosity. Today, we're delving into the pivotal role of the Government of India Act 1935 and its momentous place in Indian history. A significant leap towards provincial autonomy, this act marked a turning point and laid the groundwork for our future. The journey towards this significant milestone started with the Government of India Act 1935. Let's unravel this intriguing chapter of history. The Government of India Act 1935 didn't appear out of thin air. It was a culmination of a series of events, dialogues, and negotiations that spanned years. Its genesis can be traced back to a few key milestones in the journey towards Indian self-governance. Our story begins in 1928 with the Simon Commission. This was a group of 7 British members of Parliament, led by Sir John Simon, tasked with reviewing the functioning of the constitutional system in India. However, they faced severe opposition from Indian leaders, as the commission did not include a single Indian member. This episode underscored the urgent need for Indian involvement in the legislative process. Next, we come to the Roundtable Conferences, a series of 3 peace talks held in London between 1930 and 1932. These conferences saw Indian leaders, British politicians, and representatives of the princely states gather around the same table. The goal? To discuss the future constitutional framework of India. Despite the disagreements and political complexities, these conferences were a significant step towards Indian autonomy. They marked a shift in British policy from dominance to collaboration. The final piece of the puzzle was the White Paper of 1933. This was a policy document issued by the British government that outlined proposed changes to the Indian Constitution. The White Paper was based on the discussions and recommendations from the Roundtable Conferences. It was a tangible step towards realizing the dream of provincial autonomy for India. These events, each significant in its own right, wove together to form the backdrop against which the Government of India Act 1935 was conceived. The Act was more than just a piece of legislation. It was the embodiment of a collective aspiration for self-governance, a testament to the power of dialogue and negotiation. These events culminated in the drafting of the Government of India Act 1935, a document that would change the course of Indian history. The Act was not just a piece of legislation, it was a beacon of hope for millions. Diving into the main provisions of the Act will uncover why it was seen as such an important milestone in the journey towards provincial autonomy. One of the key provisions was the establishment of an All India Federation. This was a giant leap towards unity and cooperation. The federation was to consist of provinces and princely states as autonomous units. This arrangement aimed at maintaining a balance between the central authority and the states, fostering a sense of collective identity while respecting diversity. Next, we have the division of powers. The Act divided legislative powers between the centre and the provinces. It introduced 3 lists: federal, provincial, and concurrent. The federal list contained subjects over which only the centre could legislate. The provincial list, on the other hand, consisted of subjects on which provinces had exclusive authority. And finally, the concurrent list included subjects where both could make laws. This division was a clear indicator of the shift towards decentralization. Another landmark provision was the introduction of direct elections. This was a major stride towards democratization. The Act extended the franchise, allowing a larger number of Indians to vote. Moreover, it provided for the establishment of provincial legislatures, which were partly elected and partly nominated. These legislatures were given considerable powers and autonomy, indicating a move towards self-governance. The Act also introduced an element of responsible government at the provincial level. The ministers were to be responsible to the legislature, thus ensuring accountability and transparency. This was an important step in establishing democratic values and principles. Furthermore, the Act provided for the protection of minorities. It contained provisions for separate electorates and reserved seats for minorities, ensuring their representation and participation in the political process. Thus, the Act was a significant step towards decentralization and democratization, paving the way for self-governance. It was a testament to the fact that the journey towards autonomy and democracy, though challenging, was indeed possible and within reach. The Government of India Act 1935 did not just remain on paper, it transformed India. It set the wheels of change in motion, creating a ripple effect that would ultimately lead to India's independence. One of the immediate impacts of the Act was the formation of new provinces. These provinces, including Orissa and Sindh, were created out of the existing provinces. This was a significant step towards decentralization, as it allowed for more local control and governance. But perhaps the most significant impact of the Act was the elections of 1937. These elections represented the first major opportunity for Indians to participate in their own governance. The Act expanded the franchise, allowing more Indians than ever before to cast their votes. The Indian National Congress, one of the major political parties in India, emerged victorious in a majority of the provinces. It was a clear indication of the desire for self-rule among the Indian populace. The elections of 1937 also saw the rise of Indian political leaders. Leaders like Jawaharlal Nehru and Subhash Chandra Bose gained prominence during this period. Their leadership and their visions for an independent India were instrumental in motivating the masses and driving the struggle for independence forward. However, it's important to note that the Act wasn't without its criticisms. Many felt that it did not go far enough in granting India autonomy. Yet, despite its shortcomings, the Act served as an important stepping stone towards self-governance. The Government of India Act 1935 marked a significant shift in British policy towards India. It signaled a recognition of the growing demand for Indian self-rule. This shift in policy and the subsequent impacts of the Act created a momentum that would eventually lead to the end of British rule in India. So, in essence, the Act served as a catalyst, sparking a chain of events that would change the course of Indian history. It paved the way for the emergence of strong Indian leadership, the growth of political consciousness among the Indian masses, and the eventual realization of the dream of independence. The Act was a turning point, setting the stage for India's struggle for independence. The Government of India Act 1935 was not an end in itself. It was the beginning of a new era, an era that was marked by the first significant steps towards a democratic, representative government in India. This Act, my friends, was not just a piece of legislation. It was a seed, a blueprint for the future of India's governance. The Act laid the foundation for the Indian Constitution, the cornerstone of India's democracy. The Act's principles of provincial autonomy, division of powers, and the establishment of a federal system were all incorporated into the Indian Constitution, albeit with necessary modifications and improvements. Take the principle of provincial autonomy, for instance. The Act allowed provinces to manage their affairs independently, a concept that was later enshrined in the Constitution as state autonomy. Today, this principle allows each state in India to govern in a way that best suits its unique socio-cultural context while still being part of the larger Indian Union. The Act's division of powers between the central government and the provinces was another principle that found its way into the Constitution. This division, now between the Union and the states, ensures a balanced distribution of powers, preventing any one entity from becoming too powerful. The concept of a federal system, introduced by the Act, also made its way into the Constitution. This system, which divides power between the central government and the states, allows for a more efficient and effective governance model. It ensures that decisions are made at the levels where they are most effective, fostering a sense of shared responsibility and cooperation. And so, the Act's legacy lives on. It continues to shape India's governance, guiding the functioning of its democratic institutions. It serves as a reminder of India's journey towards self-governance, a journey marked by struggle, resilience, and ultimately triumph. The Government of India Act 1935, therefore, continues to shape India's destiny even today. The principles it introduced, the foundations it laid, and the autonomy it promoted all continue to guide the world's largest democracy. And that, my friends, is the enduring legacy of the Act. So, what have we learned about the Government of India Act 1935? Well, we've journeyed back in time to the genesis of the Act, understanding the political and social climate that birthed such a transformative piece of legislation. We've dug into the key provisions of the Act, exploring how it laid the groundwork for provincial autonomy, a significant step in India's march towards independence. We've also analyzed the immediate impact of the Act. It's clear that while it was far from perfect, its implementation was a significant milestone, introducing new concepts of governance and administration which were revolutionary for that time. And of course, we've examined the enduring legacy of the Act. It's fascinating to see how this legislation, born out of a colonial context, has contributed to shaping the democratic framework of independent India. It's a testament to the Act's far-reaching influence that portions of it are still in effect today, over 80 years later. In essence, the Government of India Act 1935 was more than a piece of legislation. It was a beacon of hope for a nation yearning for self-governance, a catalyst for change in the face of oppressive colonial rule, and a testament to the indomitable spirit of a nation on the brink of freedom. The Act was more than just legislation. It was a symbol of hope, change, and the indomitable spirit of a nation on the brink of freedom.